Morning, Congressman Khanna, Democrat of California, serves on Armed Services as well as the Oversight and Government Reform Committee. And yesterday, before that committee, you had a hearing about H.R. 1. Remind our viewers what this legislation is, and what did you learn yesterday from the hearing?
Well, H.R. 1 is the Democrats' reform package, which has some very basic things. It says every person in the executive branch should have basic ethics. You shouldn't be able to work for the president and then go work for a lobbyist. We need basic campaign finance reform to overturn Citizens United and to make sure people who are giving small dollar contributions get a match so that small dollars fund campaigns as opposed to large special interests. We need to have same-day voter registration and have an election holiday and improve voting registration and voting rights. So it's a package to strengthen our democracy. What we learned is that many experts thought that these were needed reforms. Some of them, frankly, were executive orders that previous presidents had, but we want to make them into statute so no president has the discretion to not follow them.
Let's take one of those issues, because during yesterday's hearing, Congressman Jody Hice from Georgia had this to say about automatic voter registration in illegal immigrants.
Simultaneously, when an illegal alien fails to decline, fails to recognize that they're here illegally and they're ineligible to vote, despite the ineligibility, they cannot be prosecuted. So this bill is just going to make it extremely difficult to maintain accurate voting records. It's going to open the floodgate for fraud. And so what we basically have here is a proposal that will lead to more illegal aliens registering to vote, making it virtually impossible to prosecute them for doing so, and making it difficult for states to clean up their voter lists. In process, what that does to the American citizen, the voter, it waters down the power of their vote by allowing illegals to do so. It makes those who are eligible, their vote to have less impact.
Congressman?
Well, I strongly disagree with that. First of all, there are no statistics or data. It's just pure assertion. There is nothing to prove or suggest that having automatic voter registration leads to more undocumented folks registering. What it does is it allows more low-income Americans, people who don't come from privilege, to participate and register. But there's just absolutely no data. It's just a blanket assertion that's false.
What else did you hear from Republicans yesterday in the hearing? They made several arguments against this legislation.
Well, one of the arguments was that this violates the First Amendment. There was actually a professor who was saying that donors have a moderating influence on our democracy. So I was on the committee and I read a quote about who first proposed public financing. Guess who it was? It was Theodore Roosevelt in 1907. And I said, really? Your view is really that donors have a moderating influence? That is not my view. My view is we can trust the American public and we don't need 5% to sort of moderate what the rest of the country wants. So I think there's a real difference of opinion on the role of elites. Some people feel that those who have had economic success deserve a larger say in our democracy. I fully reject that. I believe that we need to give every citizen an equal say in our democracy.
What changes would voters see if this legislation passes the House, passes the Senate, and the president signs it?
One, they would be confident that the people regulating industries aren't then going and working for those industries. I mean, right now you have revolving doors. The person who's regulating in the EPA chemicals comes from the chemical industry. People who are overseeing pharmaceuticals often are coming from the pharmaceutical industry. Those at the FCC who are overseeing telecoms are coming from the telecom industry. This would say you can't profit of the work you're doing in government. Second, it would get rid or diminish the role of special interest money. And I say get rid of it on both sides. I don't want billionaires pouring money on the Democratic side. I don't want them doing it on the Republican side. For those Republicans who complain about George Soros or liberal funding, they should be for this bill. This bill would say anyone who matters is the voter, not billionaires.
How would you stop that money coming into campaigns?
Well, if you overturn Citizens United, that would do it. I mean,
this legislation would overturn Citizens United.
This legislation would do that, and this legislation would provide an alternative path, which is empowering small dollar donors. There's a program which is a pilot program which says every voter should be a donor. Basically, give every voter $50 that they can spend on elections, and that would dwarf all the special interest money. Seattle has tried it. It's worked. Austin is thinking about trying it. Basically, every voter should have an equal say in this country, not people who are pouring millions of dollars or giving $2,700 or $5,400 checks.
Why do you have to give money in the first place?
Well, but look, campaigns cost money. I mean, you have to be at least on Facebook or Twitter or send out mailers or TV. But the question is, how are you funding that? And my view is that money should come from ordinary citizens giving $50, $100. And you know who should be for it is everyone. A lot of the people who voted for Trump should be for it. I mean, the people who were the big money candidates, Jeb Bush, and who went around raising super PAC money, didn't win. I'm for grassroots fundraising, whether it's Bernie Sanders or whoever it is, and getting rid of the donor class.
By the way, if you missed yesterday's hearing, C-SPAN covered it. You can go to our website, cspan.org, and find it there. Want our viewers to call in and ask the congressman questions and also give us your concerns if you have any over the legislation that he's talking about, H.R. 1. Republicans 202-748-8001, Democrats 202-748-8000, and Independents 202-748-8002. So, Congressman, you have been in Congress now for 2 terms. You have quite a few freshmen on this committee. Names that people know, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, and you have Ileana Presley. You have yes, and Rashida Tlaib as well.
It's amazing they're that famous. You've got them all.
Well, I'm wondering what you thought of yesterday of their line of questioning, and also tell our viewers who you all heard from. Who were those witnesses?
Right. Well, the questions they asked were terrific, and in particular, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez had a line of questioning where she played a game and said, imagine if I was a bad guy and what that would mean for the election system. I think one of the things these freshmen are doing is demythologizing Congress. They don't speak in jargon. Some of us, we're often technical. They make it fun. They made politics fun and interesting, and they've captured the attention of speaking in a way that ordinary people can understand, that millennials can relate to. And I think that's a real service, whatever side of the aisle you're on, to make politics more relatable and accessible. The people who were testifying, one was from Common Cause, a organization devoted to campaign finance reform. There were a couple professors and academics who had studied the First Amendment and studied issues of campaign finance. There was someone who on ethics who had served previously in the administration, I think in the Obama administration, on ethics issues. So it was a great group of panelists.
Let's hear from callers. Richard in Montreal, Canada, Republican.
Good morning, Congressman.
Good morning.
Good morning. Last year, House Resolution 1071, 75% of Democrats did not vote for it, which says recognizing that allowing illegal immigrants the right to vote devalues the franchise and diminishes the voting power of United States citizens. Doesn't that mean that 75% of Democrats in the House support illegal immigrants voting in American elections? Thank you.
I don't think so. That was a last-minute partisan resolution introduced by Kevin McCarthy 3 weeks before the election. And I certainly don't support people who are undocumented voting in our federal elections, and many folks on the Democratic side don't. But we didn't want to politicize that issue, and that was a blatant attempt by the Republicans to politicize that issue. It's not a political issue. People who should vote should be citizens.
Irwin, Tennessee. Rick is watching there, Democrat.
Hello. This money in politics, I was watching something on Free Speech TV, and a guy came on there, and evidently the trouble with all these people giving all this money is a big deal, but the guy's proposition was, since the Supreme Court has pretty much backed up Congress's ability to tax, his idea was start taxing large donations over maybe a certain amount, like whatever the campaign limit is, like at 99%. And that way they can donate all they want, but they just got to, they just get taxed real heavily on it, and that'll kind of put a damper on that.
It's an intriguing idea, and I think it may be constitutional to put a tax on large contributions. I'm not sure it would be a sufficient deterrent, though, because some of these billionaires who are putting money, even if you tax it at 100%, they stand to gain so much from legislation that's going to give them tax breaks or deregulate their industries. I think the real solution is to empower individual donors to overwhelm the special interest money and to ban these people from putting unlimited money into campaigns. I mean, this is something that no one in our founders would never imagine that we would have billionaires have this kind of influence in our democracy.
Spencer, who's in Norridgewock, Maine. I think I said that right. Independent. Hi, Spencer.
Hi, how you doing? First of all, I did vote for President Trump, but I could get behind laws and legislation that takes the big money out of politics. One point I want to make, there's a big difference between big money in politics and a group, a lobbying group, the only lobbying group set up for the citizens, by the citizens. When you demonize the NRA, you're demonizing grandparents and sheriffs and law-abiding citizens in rural areas who live 20 minutes from any help that's going to come. The NRA, and I'm not even a member of the NRA, but it's teachers, it's workers, it's police officers, it's people paying membership dues to have some influence in Congress, and we have that right. And that's basically the point I wanted to make. We can't keep demonizing each other. Thank you.
Well, Spencer, thank you for calling in. I'm glad to hear that you agree of getting big money politics out. That's not a Democratic position. As I mentioned earlier, Theodore Roosevelt was the first reformer who talked about getting big money out. In terms of demonization, I don't think anyone should be demonizing any group, but we do need common sense gun safety laws. I had a town hall in my district with Steve Kerr, who's the coach of the Warriors, and one of the Parkland kids, talking about the need for background checks, talking about the need for getting assault weapons off our streets. And there was someone in my district from the NRA, a member of the NRA, and he got up and he said, I have a daughter, my daughter's in school, I care about common sense gun safety. So we need to have a conversation about, with civility for people who are law-abiding gun owners, about what measures we can take to keep this country safe, and to listen to some of those Parkland kids who are saying that this shouldn't be a political issue. It's about the safety of kids in our schools. You
can listen to both of those kind of conversations. We had it earlier this morning on the Washington Journal, but we also covered the House Judiciary Committee hearing yesterday, where they heard from a variety of people, including Parkland shooting survivors as well. Go to our website, cspan.org. You can find it there. Phil, Studio City, California, Democrat.
Good morning, guys. Morning, Greta. Representative Khanna. I just wanted to ask a question about uninformed voters. And I mean, I know the big push is to get everybody out there and everybody voting now, and that seems to be the trend. And I just kind of have a hard time wrapping my mind around the logic of how it's beneficial to all of us if we have a lot of people voting that really don't know a lot of the issues, and they just fill out, the Scantron, and they're just picking bubbles. Like, how does that benefit us as a society? What's your opinion on that?
Well, Phil, I think as we've expanded voting rights, people have stepped up to the challenge. I mean, in our early part of the Republic, people said, well, only property owners should vote because they actually understand the issues. But as we expanded franchise, Americans time and again have stepped up to their civic responsibility. My view is, as more people register to vote a week or 2 weeks before the election, they will take it seriously. But I agree with you, it has to start from kindergarten and in elementary school. I remember in elementary school, I was born in Philadelphia, we had field trips to Independence Hall and to the Liberty Bell, and we had civics classes about how Pennsylvania was founded and the country was founded. That really needs to be ingrained in young people from a young age, and how important the right to vote is and the responsibility of voting is.
Keno is in Lakeland, Florida, Republican. Hi, Keno.
Hello, good morning.
Morning.
Good morning.
To C-SPAN for allowing regular citizens to have a voice in national politics. I am a Republican who's promoting the idea that Republicans should start cooperating with Democrats to move around President Trump. It's called the Moose Herder Coalition, and I want, in honor of Teddy Roosevelt, I want those Republicans that will cooperate with the Democrats to start calling themselves moose herders or pass the moose herder agenda. First is infrastructure. Now we're looking for Mitt Romney to be the leader of the Republicans in the Senate that are willing to cooperate with Democrats and will go around the incompetent, inconsistent, unfit President Trump. We're going to have Congress override his vetoes and just go around him. And so do you agree that Democrats can start lobbying Mitt Romney to be a leader to organize some Republicans in the Senate enough to cooperate with Democrats?
Keno, did you come up with the idea and the name, or did you hear that somewhere else?
No, I invented that name as a devotee, and I love Teddy Roosevelt and what he stands for in the history of the Republican Party.
Okay.
So now, and these Republicans that are going to cooperate with Democrats can invent their own name, the Eagles or the Griffins or something. And so I want us all to cooperate. And now, Moni on Books TV, Nomi Prinz has an idea for an infrastructure bank that would help get the infrastructure. So we can use her ideas from the benefit of C-SPAN presenting her to the public and cooperation between Republicans, and let's push Mitt Romney to get the Republicans organized in the Senate. Now, I have several letters to the editor.
Okay.
People can look up.
All right, Keno. Okay, let's take it. Moose Herder Coalition.
Keno, let me know when you're running for Congress. We can use more Republicans like you in our body. The infrastructure bank is something worth looking at. Alexander Hamilton created. That's how he started our nation, and I share your admiration for Teddy Roosevelt. I guess I'm skeptical on Mitt Romney because when I was at the State of the Union, I saw Mitt Romney seated next to Ted Cruz, and I thought, what are they thinking with Donald Trump speaking? Of course, they both ran for president, but Mitt Romney got up and applauded on almost every line out of that the president said. So I don't think he has shown yet the independence. If he does show the independence and is willing to work on infrastructure or prescription drugs or high-speed internet and expanding broadband, then I'd be willing to work with him. Your previous guest, Bob Woodall, is someone who I have worked with and who has reached across the aisle. So there are members of Congress who want to get over the partisanship and get things done.
Matt in Mechanicsville, Maryland, independent.
Hi, thanks for taking my call. This is a good topic. This is one of these classic campaign finance reform topics where most of these proposals to do any type of campaign finance reform is just part of the two-party dominant system of our politics. The framers never commented seriously on the fact in a capitalist society you wouldn't be able to use your money where you want to use it. What they did comment on is that they never envisioned the party systems the way they are. And so what I'm saying is more important than campaign finance reform is the idea of respecting third and fourth parties into the debates and also putting term limits. And I know that's a little bit different topic, but term limits on some of the politicians in there, some of the seats in the Senate and the and the House of Representatives. The idea that you can tell somebody where they can spend their money it's antithetical to, and it's been ruled on by the Supreme Court. And I'll take the comments off the air. Thanks.
Well, thank you. I agree with the point on more parties. I mean, I've always supported third parties or independents getting into elections. I think they make our country stronger, our democracy stronger, and I don't think there's any reason just to have two parties. And you may see the emergence of more parties. In terms of funding, I don't think our framers ever envisioned that someone who started a coffee business would be able to run for president because they had $1 billion. I mean, our framers read John Locke and studied public affairs, and they thought it was really a serious thing to be in public service. So this idea of unlimited money coming in to distort the public process is not something our framers envisioned, not something Teddy Roosevelt envisioned. And even up till recently, I mean, Ronald Reagan got elected president taking public financing for federal elections. It's only in the last, I would say, 10 years that you've had this explosion of special interest money distorting our democracy. I saw an interview with Jimmy Carter. He said he never would have gotten elected president in the current system, given the amount of money you have to raise.
Congressman, you're also on the Armed Services Committee, so I want you to react to the president yesterday. He went to the State Department to talk about talk with members of the global coalition trying to defeat ISIS. This is what he had to say.
When I took office, one of my very first acts was to go to the Pentagon and ask them to produce and show me a plan to defeat ISIS. Under the new approach we developed, we empowered our commanders in the field, enabled our partners on the ground, and directly confronted ISIS's wicked ideology. And we're doing that today, except in even greater numbers. As a result, as I noted in my State of the Union address yesterday, the United States military, our coalition partners, and the Syrian Democratic Forces have liberated virtually all of the territory previously held by ISIS in Syria and Iraq. It should be formally announced sometime, probably next week, that we will have 100% of the caliphate.
Congressman, from your seat on the Armed Services Committee, do you believe that that will be the situation in what the Washington Times says, a full battlefield defeat of the Islamic State in days?
Well, first of all, I wish the president were just more honest, which is that President Obama started this strategy with ISIS. The same strategy that President Trump criticized on the campaign trail was started by President Obama to defeat ISIS in Syria. President Trump continued that strategy, and it is true that ISIS now only controls about 15 kilometers of territory in Syria, and that it is time to bring our troops home. But it's not that Trump started something different. What he did is continue the Obama policy. Same thing about the economy. I mean, the president was boasting about the economy. On the campaign trail, he criticized those very numbers that he's now boasting about. So in certain areas, he's had a continuation of the Obama policy. It has worked in Syria. I think any reasonable person would say it has. And I think it's time to responsibly bring our troops home. We'll hear from James in Waveland, Mississippi, Independent.
Good morning, Greta. Good morning, Representative Khanna.
Good morning.
Sir, if you don't mind, I had an anecdote that highlights the importance of your legislation, and I also had a question in regards to your committee.
Sure.
First, the anecdote. I'm not going to name names, but there was a certain late-night show several years ago where there was a very wealthy and successful artist on the program, and the host of the show was highlighting the fact that so many conservative billionaires are very influential in local, state, and even federal politics. And he aroused a rallying cry asking, where are our billionaires to fight back? So I think that speaks to the importance of what you're trying to propose in your legislation. In regards to the question, sir, I am wondering, just out of curiosity, if there is any discussion or any idea of one day there being a secure, government-controlled application that can be downloaded to a phone from which an American citizen can vote, if that's even something within the realm of possibility.
Okay.
Right. Well, first, I appreciate your anecdote, and that's exactly the problem. We don't want our democracy to be a war of billionaires, the conservative billionaires versus the liberal billionaires. The great premise of American democracy is the genius of ordinary individuals. We believe that whether you're a member of Congress, whether you're an administrative assistant, whether you're a CEO, you have an equal and important perspective and voice in a democracy, and that's what's being distorted. So this is about returning the sense of equality of people in their voice in a democracy. Your idea about internet voting is an intriguing one. I think Estonia and some countries have moved there. Of course, we would need to make sure it was not subject to interference. I mean, we had the Russians interfere in our elections, and I would be concerned to make sure the security was enough. We would want some form of paper verification. But I do think we should research a technology and make sure it was secure. And if we could do it, it would certainly make voting easier.
Rita's watching in Gaithersburg, Maryland, a Democrat.
Hello.
Hello.
Thank you for putting forth this legislation. I think big donor money from both sides is corrupting the democratic process. I've been dismayed since the early 2000s at what it is doing to our country. So thank you for the legislation. I hope it gets through. On the previous caller who mentioned taxing rich donors, that is an intriguing idea. I think it sidesteps the real problem. But the only way it would really work is to spend that tax money on something distasteful to many large donors, which is fighting climate change, putting in the infrastructure, mitigation, etc. I think we would see big donors drop away like flies.
Well, I appreciate that. I want to make clear this is John Sarbanes' bill. A lot of us are supporting it, but John Sarbanes has done an extraordinary job to lead our efforts on H.R. 1. I agree with the caller on climate change. It's a existential threat to our planet. The Intergovernmental Panel for Climate Change has a report that if in the next 12 years we don't take action to lower the temperature rise from 2 degrees to 1.5 degrees, then we're going to be digging ourselves in a very deep hole that is going to have catastrophic impact in different places around the planet. And we know what we need to do. That's why several of us are getting behind a Green New Deal to push for renewable energy, to push for planting trees and prevent deforestation, to push for weatherization and energy efficiency. These are policies that every American should support, every person should support who cares about the fate of our planet.
It's a headline on the front page of the newspapers this morning. Here's the New York Times. 2018 continues warming trend as fourth hottest year since 1880. Roberta in San Diego, Republican. Hi, Roberta.
Well, I don't really know where to start. I have spoken first off to your